It was not just a blizzard, a natural, ruthless storm. But what they didn't know was that the snow itself wasn't the only thing closing in on them. Imagine being trapped in the middle of nowhere, with snow falling so fast and so thick that the world outside your window disappears. A small family, cut off from everything they know, is stuck in a cabin deep in the mountains during a record-breaking storm. But as the days stretch into nights, and the nights turn darker than they should, they begin to notice something isn't right. Shadows start moving in the snow, whispering voices call from the storm, and paranoia sets in. What would you do if the snowstorm wasn't the only thing trying to get in? It started as a family retreat, a chance to unplug and spend time together. Mark, his wife Lisa, their teenage daughter Emily, and their 9-year-old son Jack were looking forward to a week away from the chaos of the city. They had rented a cozy cabin nestled deep in the Rockies, miles away from the nearest town. No internet, no neighbors, just peace and quiet. But on the second day, the snow began to fall. It wasn't a gentle snowfall, the kind that coats the world in a soft blanket. No, this storm came with ferocity, an unrelenting blizzard that blocked the roads. The storm buried their car and cut off power. At first, they made the best of it. They lit the fireplace, played board games by candlelight, and told stories to pass the time. But as the storm dragged on, the isolation started to feel less cozy and more oppressive. And then came the first shadow. Jack saw it first. He had been sitting by the window, staring out into the endless white, when he gasped, "Mom, Dad, there's someone out there." Mark rushed over, peering through the frosted glass. "It's just the snow, buddy. There's no one out there." But Jack was adamant. "I saw it. A person. They were standing right there." Lisa tried to reassure him. "It's probably just a trick of the light. Shadows can look strange in the snow." But Jack's face was pale. It wasn't a shadow. It was looking at me. As the hours passed, the family couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that Jack's shadow wasn't just his imagination. Emily claimed she heard tapping on her bedroom window that night, though her room was on the second floor. Mark brushed it off as a branch swaying in the wind, but when he checked, there were no trees close enough to touch the cabin. By the third day, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Supplies were running low, and the cold seemed to seep through the very walls of the cabin, no matter how high they stoked the fire. Lisa suggested they try to dig out the car and leave, but Mark shook his head. "The roads are probably worse than the driveway. We get stuck halfway to town." But staying put didn't feel safe anymore. Shadows had started appearing at night, moving across the snow like silent figures. Sometimes they seemed to hover near the windows, just out of sight, but close enough that you could feel their presence. One night, Mark decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a snow shovel, he stepped out into the freezing night. The snow swallowed the sound of his footsteps, muffling the world into an eerie silence. He swept the beam of light across the drifts, half expecting to see footprints, but there were none. And then, just as he turned to head back inside, he saw it, a shadow, human-shaped but wrong. Its arms were too long, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette with broken strings. And then it disappeared, melting into the storm. Mark slammed the door behind him, his heart pounding. He didn't tell Lisa or the kids what he saw. How could he, when he wasn't even sure it was real? But the next day, Lisa found something horrifying. Pressed against the frost-covered window of the living room was the unmistakable outline of a handprint. By the 6th day, the family was unraveling. Jack refused to leave his bed, Lisa was praying out loud, and Emily wouldn't let go of the kitchen knife she'd started carrying. The shadows were everywhere now, circling the cabin. They heard a voice calling from the storm. "Help me, please. I'm lost." It was a woman's voice, weak and desperate. Against Lisa's protests, Mark opened the door. Standing in the snow was a woman, shivering and barefoot, her face pale and gaunt. "Please," she whispered, "let me in." But as Mark stepped closer, he saw her eyes. They were black, solid black, with no whites or pupils. The shadows behind her began to move, rising up like tendrils, reaching for the door. Mark slammed it shut just in time. The woman let out an unearthly scream, a sound that didn't belong to anything human. The cabin shook, the windows rattled, and the fire in the hearth extinguished itself, plunging the family into darkness. The storm finally ended on the 7th day. Rescue teams found the family huddled together in the living room, alive but visibly shaken. When asked what had happened, none of them spoke.